Chuck, when I'm facilitating a course, storytelling is a big part of it. I really enjoy, when I'm a learner, I enjoy hearing a narrative. I enjoy listening to a facilitator connect information to me in a real world situation, a storytelling capacity. What are your thoughts on using storytelling in learning, either e-learning or in-person learning? What are some techniques for incorporating this storytelling to enhance learner engagement in this case?
Well, this is a great question. I'm glad that we're going to cover this because storytelling and narrative are really important parts of adult learning. And as you mentioned, adults, they like to be able to reference things within their frame of reference, within their needs. Has someone else done this before? How did they do it? Can I do it better? Did they make the same mistakes I made? All of this is part of narrative and storytelling. And when you do this, and especially as an instructional designer, if you think about it, if you can incorporate this into what you're designing, assuming content and population match and it's something that works for them. But that aside, and I learned this a long time ago, and I had nothing to do with ISD, to be honest. When I was a provost, I was responsible for an archives. And the archivist many times would sit down with folks and do oral histories. And they would sit with them for half a day and just sit there and record it and talk to them and let them share their stories and do all of those things. And that used to fascinate me because the people that did this were really good at it. And they would draw out things from folks that they were interviewing that you would never get any other way. And you could not share in any other way. So there is something to be said for the personal connection, one person talking to another and sharing that experience. But then the trick becomes, as instructional designers, how do we build this into our lessons? How do we make this part of something more powerful? And I think most of us can figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, from a development point of view, when I'm writing a development plan, if I were to incorporate storytelling, narrative as a mechanism, I would probably just put into the lesson plan, use your own words so that they can then put their own spin to whatever it is they're going to be presenting. I've seen that. I appreciate that when that is done, when that's put into a design plan. It helps me as a facilitator to be able to look at that in advance and plan for that and say, okay, how can I connect this information via a narrative so that people can feel something, people can connect to that because they're able to see themselves in whatever it is you're presenting. And I think that's paramount, right, for anything that you're going to be teaching.
It's really important. And if you think about it, if you're a professional designer and you use Gagne's 9 events, or you think about how learning takes place, where are you going to put these narratives? You're going to put them in gaining attention. You may put them in recall. You certainly put them in element 4, which is content. But then you get in 5, 6, and 7, where you have the interaction between the content and the learner and the facilitation. And here's where that personal story makes a lot of sense. So I've seen in professional designs, gaining attention is sometimes the narrative. Okay, this is what happened to me. These are the mistakes I made doing this, which we are going to be talking about, and you will be learning today or this week. And if you think about it from a design perspective, it's got homes all over the 9 event. I mean, there could be a sign at all 9 at some level. But think about it in terms of adult learners. Think about it in terms of personalizing, talking to them about their needs. Someone else had the same problem, all the things I've said. It really is a powerful tool for us.
Absolutely. When you talked about the activity part, how would you incorporate narrative into that?
Yeah, so you think about it, okay, I'm a facilitator. I have 10, 15 people, and we're going through the application feedback in Gagne, which is 5, 6, and 7. And what you're going to do in there as a facilitator, especially if you have experience with this, which I would hope you would, whatever the content area is, as you start those discussions, think, I was at that place too. And here's what I thought I was doing. Here's what it ended up. And this is how I could have done that better. And let me share with that all that information so that, okay, when you get to that point, Oh gosh, I remember Denise said that, or I remember Chuck said that, or somebody else in the class. It had an experience that I'm now facing, and I can think through that because it doesn't hit me in the side of the head. It's not a surprise to me, and I've heard this narrative. I've heard the whole thing, and okay, that's what they said worked for them. Let me think about that and see if I can apply it some way to what I need to do.
Yeah. And, as a facilitator, I have learned so much from learners when they use their narratives. I actually can still recall some really deep, impactful stories that I heard when they were applying this information within a classroom environment, what they shared. And it really hits you and it really stays with you. It really helps to make learning stick outside the classroom.
And some of the ways that this is really powerful, and I'm not going to get into too much depth because I may hit some nerves. I don't want to do that. But in the police academy, for me personally, as someone in the academy, and later in life as an instructional designer, putting together things for first responders and all of the other things. And one of the things that is most powerful in that world is personal experience. So I could say, okay, I drove up on this accident and this is what I saw. And I never thought in my life I would see that. Or as a first responder, okay, I drove up and this was the situation I had. I had a family that was completely losing it because the grandfather was on the ground. And I had to jump in and do CPR. And I tell this story. This is one of the stories that I would tell as a narrative from my personal experience, because that happened to me when I was a very young police officer. A picnic of 45 or 50 people, and the grandfather was on the ground. And they were losing it. And it's a 23-year-old. So if I wouldn't have had the narratives in the academy with other officers much more experienced talking about how you handle those situations and doing it from the perspective of this is what I had to do and this is what I felt. And boy, that was powerful. So when I had to face those situations, I at least had that on my shoulder. And I could think about it, okay, I'm not the first one to do this. This is what so-and-so did with it. Let me think about this. And you have to do this in 10 seconds, but that's kind of what you do. So you carry this narrative across any kind of content or in any kind of population where experience matters.
Yeah. And what you just did was you shared a story, you shared a narrative. And so that's something that's going to stick in my brain, the story you just told us. And that's the power of it, folks, right there. Storytelling in action, helping to make learning stick in situations where it truly, truly matters. Thanks, Chuck, for sharing those insights. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this episode. And again, if you have questions, leave them in the comments. We would love to discuss them and maybe feature them on a future show. Thanks so much.